Hello, you. Welcome to the very first episode of Hair for Radio with me, Jamie Stangroom. If you stumbled across this podcast seeking tips for your hair, or maybe you're looking for a wig for your radio to wear, then you're in the wrong place. If, however, you seek a revolutionary format where I, a human man, ask questions for other humans to answer, then this is the podcast you've been looking for. I've been interviewing music, film and sports people for about 12 years now, to a total of something like 6,000 recorded chats, from hospital and student radio right up to the likes of the BBC, Comedy Central and even StarWars.com. And the idea of this podcast is that I interview who I want, assuming they'll talk to me, that is. No remit set by the man, just people I find interesting, basically. Some of them you might know, some of them you might not, but really probably should. IMO. And I'm setting off with puppeteer, voice performer and film director Frank Oz, one of the original Muppet Guys. He's the man behind Miss Piggy, Animal, Cookie Monster, Yoda. It's fair to say that he's touched everybody's childhoods in a totally appropriate way. Born in Hereford, England to parent puppeteers, the family moved to Oakland, California, where a teenage Frank eventually began his own puppeteering at a local amusement park. He finally retired from Muppets performing in the early 2000s and recently released an independent documentary with his wife Victoria LeBon titled Muppet Guys Talking, and it celebrates the original Muppet Guy performers in the form of talking, basically, and it's great. In our chat, Frank told me what it was like to work with Jim Henson, why he thinks the modern-day Muppets have lost their edge, and explained how he went from wannabe journalist to becoming an accidental women's lib movement pioneer with a pig puppet, as you do. With Frank in that there New York City, and me in this here London town, it went something like this. Frank, you ready?
I am ready.
Greetings, Frank Oz. How the devil is one?
How the devil? Yeah. You're associating me with the devil immediately?
Yeah. It's a good start, isn't it? I'm warming you up.
I'm doing great, thanks.
Now, we are gathered here today to talk about a marvellous new documentary film called Muppet Guys Talking, which I've seen and I've got a whole lot of love for.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
I'm not done yet.
Really
I'm not done yet, Frank.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can I just take the interruption back?
Yes.
Okay, I'll shut up.
Thank you. And I feel grateful to have it in my life, because if a certain someone in this conversation that isn't me had his way, it might never have seen the light of day, and I'd be sat here with even less joy in my sad, pathetic existence. Do you know what I'm getting at here, Frank?
I do indeed.
Explain yourself, please.
Well, my wife, Victoria, who's next to me, felt that after she saw me with all the Muppet Guys, the original Muppet Guys, that our relationship was worthy of showing on television or in movies because of the manner in which we relate to each other, with a lot of teasing and yet a lot of support and a lot of storytelling. So she said, let's do a documentary. And I said no. And I said no for about a year and a half.
A whole year of saying no?
Yeah, because, see, for me, I started with Jim when I was 19 years old in 1964 in New York City in a one-flight walk-up with 2 rooms and 4 people. So therefore, this has been my entire life. So it's like me going to the office every day. I mean, it's not an office, but to me, everything I've done is just kind of normal. It's nothing. So it took me a while to realize that it was worthwhile, and I that's all due to Victoria LeBon.
She's your wife, as you mentioned, so I presume you live together. This nagging must have got kind of intense.
Well, it wasn't nagging. It wasn't nagging. Victoria, tell me what it was, please.
Hi, Jamie.
Hello.
So, yes, I would not say it was nagging. It was more suggesting every so often.
It was more screaming.
No.
Tactical?
Tactical, strategic prods where I said, I think this is really valuable. I feel there is something here that the world needs to see.
Yeah.
So, Frank, what made you finally see the light?
2 reasons. One is, all the guys, I get some credit because people know me more than the guys. And Jim loved all the guys, the guys being women also, in the company who performed, because he knew that he could not do what he could want to do without us. And he loved us. But because he was so famous, we didn't really become famous. And we didn't care. But now that he's gone, and they should know more about who the people were who were so brilliant and supported Jim and were on these productions. So that's one of the reasons that I did it, to give them their due. And then I realized another reason was what Victoria told me, is because our culture with Jim was such that it was unusual in today's world. Why don't you tell them that to Victoria? Because if I say it, it's Victoria's words, so I'll let Victoria say it.
Go on.
The way these originators interacted, the way they joked with each other, gave each other a hard time, and then were supportive, the way they listened to each other and collaborated was unlike any type of community I'd ever witnessed in a family, in a team, in a business. And I felt there was value in that for anyone who's leading themselves or a group of creatives or any type of company.
And it really does live up to its title very well, I have to say. It's exactly 5 guys who are Muppets talking about being Muppets. So let's go through those Muppet guys that we see in the film. I'll give the human name, and if you could give the Muppet, okay?
Sure.
Or Muppets. Let's start with Dave Goelz.
Dave Goelz is Bunsen Honeydew, Gonzo, Zoot the sax player. Those are the 3 main characters. He also does Mal Otter. He's worked on Fraggle Rock. We have so many characters. I'll just name the top 3. How's that?
That's a deal. Fran Brill.
Fran Brill is Little Bird. She's Prairie Dawn, and she's Zoe, yeah. And Zoe always used to say, I'm joking you. So we'd say that a lot now. The next person.
Bill Barretta.
Billy is brilliant also. He does Johnny Fiamma. He does Bobo the Bear, and he does an incredibly popular character, which we all love. It's called Pepe, the king crab.
King Prawn. King Prawn.
Sorry, he'd be upset at me.
Jerry Nelson.
Well, Jerry, is just somebody who does everything. Jerry was Floyd. He was Snuffleupagus. He was the Count. He was Little Robin, which is Kermit's nephew. He was New Zealand, one of my favorite characters, the boomerang fish thrower. He does a lot of them.
And he did pass away, didn't he, sadly, after filming?
He did. So we're blessed that we got him. I thank my wife every day for that.
I suppose that also gives another layer of importance to this film, and the fact that you did get these guys together in one room to do it, do it while you can.
Yeah, Jamie, because I have had hundreds of interviews by myself, and they've had interviews galore by themselves, but we've never ever gotten in a room together and talked, which sounds odd to some people, but Jamie, you work with people there, right? How many people do you work with? 2 or 3?
I'm lucky to have one. People try not to work with me.
But
basically.
then do you ever sit together with that one person and go through your entire career?
No.
Yeah. So it's an unusual thing. So we did that for the first time, and we mainly told stories and talked about Jim and how it was to work with Jim. And we kind of gave out a lot of secrets that nobody knew about. And a lot of stories that had to do with risking our lives that nobody knew about. There's a lot of stuff that people didn't know about. We just wanted to show them the Muppets.
I missed off one of the Muppet guys from the list of 5 that I have here. So we did Dave Goelz, Fran Brill, Jerry Nelson, Bill Barretta, and there's also some guy called Frank Oz. Now, I don't know much about him, but I hear he can be a bit stubborn, even with his wife.
He's pretty much a C puppeteer. The others are A puppeteers.
Okay.
Yeah, he does nothing.
All
no,
right.
I do.
You don't need to dwell on him then.
I do Cookie Monster, Grover, Bert, Animal, Miss Piggy, Fozzie, etc.
Never heard of any of them. But one thing I have to say, you just watching the documentary, you all come across as really nice, fun guys, superficially at least. I don't really know any of you, but it does feel very natural. Would it have been much different if the cameras weren't there?
No, not at all. That's us. We feed off each other, and that's just who we are, no matter cameras or not.
You said it yourself just a moment ago. A big theme, of course, is Jim Henson and what he meant to you all. What was he like to work with?
Well, that's the great thing about this documentary, because people don't know certain things about Jim. It goes more in detail, but I'll just hit the main points. Jim was an extraordinary person, a leader who never led, which means that he'd never said follow him. He never told us what to do. What he did was he just did what he did, and then he led by that, by just doing what he did, and we just followed him. He was just an example. It was an extraordinary way to lead because he was the head of the company, but he never saw himself as a leader. He saw himself, of course, as an artist and a creator. It just happens that he's a leader because of the person who he is. Keep on thinking of him as alive. I'm sorry.
But then he was an important part of your career and life, so I guess he stays alive in you or around you, doesn't he?
Yeah. Well, that's another thing. We were all changed by Jim, not just as performers. We learned so much, but also as human beings, because Jim was a singular human being who collaborated and valued people's opinions and also had a hell of a lot of fun and really instigated jokes. And at the same time, he was very fair and he was the hardest working man I've ever known. So he's a very multi-layered guy, and we found out much more about him in the documentary.
Well, that's a question I had, actually. You know, you guys spent so much time together doing shows in the past, and then you're brought back together in this room with the cameras on, which of course don't affect anything. But did any of you learn anything new about each other or your colleagues? Yeah,
we did. I mean, it's one of these odd things when we were. When we was just the four of us, Don, Celine, Jim Henson, Jerry, Jewel, and I, we were at this. We were in this one flight walk up in 2 rooms, as I said, and below us was Chuck's Composite, which is a restaurant. Okay. And for the first time, we found out that Franny used to be a waitress there, and that Jerry used to be a cook there at different times.
Really?
Yeah. So we were all saying, "What?" Yeah, and that was just one of the things.
Did that make the cut in the documentary, or did I not do my research?
No. We have the documentary is 65 minutes. And we have another 9 hours that we didn't use. We have so much great footage. So when we put it out, we're also going to be offering the idea of outtakes and all that stuff.
9 hours. You could do like a Lord of the Rings extended edition.
Well, we have so much after 40 years together, 35 years together. So it's better to make something tight and let the audience know there's more than bore the audience with a 7-hour cut.
It seems that you're all on the same page with one thing for sure, because you have your group conversations, but then there's the individual interviews with each of you throughout the doc. That thing that you did seem on the same page was regarding the biggest misconception, and that's what people... That's people thinking that you guys just do the voices of the Muppets, which couldn't be further away from the truth, really, could it?
Right. It's so odd. It's because of this animation culture where the celebrities do the voices and no credit is given to the animators who work for 3 years on the animation. So because I think of that, the celebrities being hailed as the stars, we as Muppet performers, it seems they equate us with them, that we do the voices. But the voices are a tiny percent of what we do. The voices are only 10% of what we do. The rest of it is performing, making sure somebody's out of the other guy's light, making sure you're funny, making sure you hit the right dialogue, making sure the cues are right, making sure you're not in somebody's way in the shot, making sure you're still doing the whole arc of the scene properly. We do a lot of stuff, and the voices, and it's very hard for people to understand that.
How much of the character would you say comes from the voice, and how much comes from the puppeteering, the movements?
Oh, 95% from the puppeteer.
Really?
Absolutely. We don't think of voices. We think of characters. And as a result, the voices come. When improvisation and such, it doesn't happen fast. Improvisation with your fellow performer, and as Franny says in the documentary, you really don't know what the characters are until you're performing with the other performer. And when you do, all of a sudden things come up and you don't even realize that you said that, and you realize, oh, that's part of the character. That's great. I'll use that.
So these characters are work in progress, really?
They're always a work in progress, just like every human being in the world.
Yeah, tell me about it. That's what I keep telling myself anyway. Talk me through the process then of developing these characters, because you must be given something to work from day one.
Oh, yeah. Each character is different, though. Gosh, Gonzo was actually made by Dave Goelz. Dave Goelz was hired by Jim to actually make the characters, and then eventually he became a performer. But he's the only one who actually made his own character. So he knew his character very well that way. And one thing one can't avoid is the tremendous value of the writers. The writers are the ones who start the characters, along with the workshop people who make the characters. They feed us to then develop the characters into something that is compelling and that touches people. So without the workshop and the writers and Jim who guided us, we would not have that beginning. So you're absolutely right, Jamie. There has to be that. We just can't do it out of whole cloth. But when we actually do then have that spark from the workshop, Jim, and the writers, then, for instance, Ernie and Bert, Jim, fell into Ernie very easily because Jim was an instigator. He loved making jokes, and Ernie loves playing jokes, and Jim loved playing. So it was pretty easy for Jim, really. For me, I had Bert, and I was frustrated for a long time because Ernie had hands, and he was delightful, and Bert was just a stick. That's all he was. He just had these boring lines, and he just had these arms that moved up and down, and his his head turned. It was nothing. There's nothing to work with. And so it was frustrating for a long time until I realized, hey, that's what I'll do. He's boring. So what I'll do is I'll make him the most boring character I can possibly make. So from that point on, Bert was truly boring. His favorite color is gray. His favorite meal is white bread and oatmeal. He has pigeons. He collects bottle caps. He studies the tributaries of the rivers around the world. I mean, really boring stuff. So I kept on building the boredom from the realization that has value as a character also.
And I suppose a bit like a songwriter, you use the world around you to build these characters as well, don't you? Because you mentioned in the film that Grover, some of the mannerisms anyway, were inspired by your dog.
Yeah, Grover in particular was, but that's the only one who was inspired by a physical being. I think all of us do. I mean, Jamie, you do. We're all connected to our environment and our relationships, and so none of us live in a vacuum. And that's kind of the wonderful thing, where if you're true to oneself and true to your environment, that you can't stay in one place. You constantly develop because. You develop the character because the person who does the character develops.
Now, I don't know how you can answer this, and I'm sure you've been asked it before. I don't know if you've ever been able to answer it before, but let's give it a go here. Fozzie Bear, Miss Piggy, Cookie Monster, Animal. I know he's not a Muppet, but I'm going to say Yoda as well, just to name 6 characters that you've worked with. Can you possibly have a favourite?
Well, it's hard, because one has to love what one does, and I love each of my characters. It's like, which child is your favorite?
You can choose, can't you?
I think it's not a sense of favorite. I think I don't have a favorite, but there are a couple that there's a sense of ease in doing it, where it's there are some characters that are very difficult to do, Animal and Piggy and Cookie and such, even Bert, but. The characters that are easiest for me to do and to connect to is Grover and a little bit of Fozzie too. Those two.
Okay. Well, we know Grover was a bit like your dog, but which of the characters would you say is most like you?
I would think Grover, probably, because the dog aspect was just a physical aspect of it, but the inside aspect was more me.
Not Miss Piggy.
God, no! If I was Miss Piggy, I'd be really sick. Are you out of your mind, Jamie?
Yeah, I don't think Victoria would be sat in that room with you right now, would she?
Miss Piggy has her internal problems. I wouldn't want to have her internal problems. Every day she's a bit tortured. Piggy became really insanely popular around the world in the 70s because that was the women's lib movement. And it just happened. I didn't do it on purpose, but it just happened that her being a tough female and yet having to act coy and feminine like most women are supposed to do, somehow hit a nerve, and that's what happened. But I don't stay with that. The world has changed, so although I haven't performed for 10 years, when I did perform after that, she kept on changing depending upon who I was inside, my growth, and the environment.
I want to mention the process of operating a Muppet a little bit, because there is an anecdote, and we don't have to go into that anecdote here. I think that should be kept for people when they watch the film, because an amazing anecdote about how Jim operated Kermit in a swamp when he's singing away on a log. But you obviously need to be out of shot. So for you, what was the weirdest way you'd been hidden?
Oh gosh, there have been so many ways. I think the weirdest way that Jim and I both together have been hidden, actually. We were in a commercial about 30 years ago when it was Kenny Rogers was not Kenny Rogers. He was part of the first edition. And we were in Houston at a kind of a western town that they made for tourists close to the Astrodome. And we were doing some sort of candy bar commercial at that time. We rarely did commercials after Sesame Street, but that one we did. It was a character called the Southern Colonel where Jim did the right hand and did the mouth of the right hand, and the left hand was his hand. My right hand was the character's right hand. So they wanted us in a barrel. So we were in a barrel. The two of us were in a barrel. We're 6 feet tall. So we squeezed into this rain barrel, the two of us. I mean squeezed. And we had to perform in that situation. Of course, the funny thing is, and this always happens with us, is we didn't hear anybody say take or print, or nobody said, okay, it's lunch. All of a sudden, there was quiet for about a few minutes. And we thought, what's going on? Yeah. And we look up, and there was nobody there. They'd all gone to lunch. And nobody told us. And we couldn't get out of the barrel by ourselves. So we decided to rock back and forth and back and forth and back until the barrel fell. And then we crawled with our legs numb out of it.
You rolled your way to lunch.
It's so funny because that happens so many times. They just consider the character believable and real, and he'll take care of himself.
Oh, so they weren't just being mean, or were they?
No, by no means. They thought, they'll take care of themselves. It's a wonderful compliment to the work of the character.
For the busy shots with you all in, you must have been so cramped. It must have been like a big game of human Tetris or something.
Well, that always happens with us. We're with the group. We are, insanely close to each other. We wrap our arms around somebody else's ear, and then the other hand for the left hand would have to be around somebody else's neck, and the other person's. We do it any way possible to make the performance work. We don't even think about that.
I want to make this about me just for a moment, for purely selfish reasons.
I got to go, Jamie.
Oh, okay. Back to me and my one friend that I actually invented earlier.
Go ahead, please.
I have to bring up the Muppets Christmas Carol because that's my childhood. I'll watch it for the rest of my life, and it will bring back good times in my mind. Watching it with my mum for the first time. What was that like to work on? Because am I right in saying it was the first film after Jim's death in 1990? Because this came out 2 years later in 92. Did it feel different?
Yeah, it was. It's a brilliant movie. It's Brian Henson who directed it, and the cinematographer and the production designer. Those two guys were amazing, just amazing. And Michael Caine, who I'd worked with previously in Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, was there, so that was a delight. I was executive producer on it, so I wasn't as involved, and I only did Piggy scenes. That's all. So I didn't work too much, but we were all very supportive of Brian, because we knew this was the first time. Something about performances and scripts. You can have the best people and nothing happens. And sometimes you get not maybe the best people or the most well-known people, let's say, and those people who've never met each other all of a sudden come together and make something wonderful like this. And that's kind of what happened.
Yeah, and it's like I say, it's maybe not one of the edgier Muppet films, but for me anyway, I was a kid when it came out, so I'll always relate to it.
It's fantastic. Yeah, I love it.
I mentioned edge there. There's something else you talk about in the doc. The Muppets were never really straight up for kids, were they?
Never. No, we've never done kids, ever. Even with Sesame Street, we didn't do it for kids. When I was a kid, I didn't know what I wanted. So if I'm an adult, how would I know what a kid wants? We just, as adults, have a great time with each other. And we know we have a curriculum. We know we have to say certain words in order to tell the kids something, but that's all. There's nothing else we do. The rest of it is just us having fun as adults. Because I don't know how to perform for kids. I have no idea.
But still, it has that label.
Right. So it's very odd that it's a labeled a kids or an adults thing sometimes. It can be narrowed down to what kids like and adults like. There's certain sophisticated layers of emotions that adults have that kids haven't developed yet. Adults like colorful characters. I mean, it's very hard to distinguish it except for a few reasons. And, of course, when people have gone just for kids, it's insulting to them. They talk down to them. I believe the kids want to reach up. So we just are our adult selves.
And the film tells us that in 1978, it's a great statistic, 235 million people a week watched the Muppets all over the world.
Isn't that amazing?
Half of those people were adults.
Isn't that amazing? Yeah.
Incredible.
And we get paid for doing something that the other adults aren't allowed to do, which is to act stupid and be silly. And I think besides just entertainment, I think people recognize a part of themselves in there that they sometimes are not allowed to let out.
Am I right in saying that Jim Henson himself, he actually thought that kids should be scared, within reason, I'm sure?
Yes, he did. He felt it was a cathartic experience for the kids. When he did Dark Crystal, he wanted to make Dark Crystal like the original Grimm's fairy tales. Now, the commercialized Grimm's fairy tales are fairly safe, but I remember my father reading a real Grimm's fairy tale to me and scared the hell out of me. But it didn't do me any wrong. I wanted to hear the next chapter.
Yeah. But you've said before that you think the Muppets today and Sesame Street have gone too safe. Do you still hold that opinion?
Yeah, I do. I'm not blaming anybody. It's just that I believe they truly want the best for the Muppets. They truly believe they know it's for the best, and I truly believe that. They just want to do the best. But they're coming from a different direction, and we're coming from a Jim Henson direction.
Are we in a more sort of PC age, though, in general? I mean, do you think you guys and Jim could have done this and broken through in this age of reality shows and social media? I guess you'd be YouTubers, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, put it this way. We would have done it anyway. While doing it, if we broke through, I don't know. But we wouldn't change in order to break through.
Yeah. YouTubers, basically. How does that sound?
I love rebellion. I'll go with the rebellious people.
Because that's the thing. I didn't know this. You were basically like comedians. You were gigging. You didn't, I would just presume you always had your own show, but you were doing little appearances on other people's shows for years before the Muppet Show was a thing.
Oh, my gosh. Yeah, we did hundreds of commercials. We did dozens of variety shows, performances. We did many, many, many shows. Yeah. But at that time, we weren't the Muppets on Sesame Street or the Muppet Show or Saturday Night Live or Fraggle Rock. We were Muppets who came in and did a 2-minute act and left.
So you really did work your way up.
Yeah, and of course, Jim worked his way up before I even joined. He and his wife, Jane, started in Washington, D.C., and this is interesting. They did a 5-minute show, but they did it late at night, about 11 or 10:45 or something, to grab the adults for the nightly news.
Really?
So that's very unusual, yeah. At that time, they were hired in order to get attention so Huntley and Brinkley could be seen at that hour. Or whoever it was. And then that show, Sam and Friends, got an Emmy, and then they moved to New York in 1963 or so, and I came in 1964. So it started even way back before me.
This is all well and good, Frank. We've been sat here, we've been chatting about Muppets for a number of minutes now. However, you actually never wanted to be a puppeteer, did you?
Correct.
You wanted to be a journalist.
Correct.
What went right?
Yeah, well, I think the Fourth Estate is not missing me these days. Of course, the Fourth Estate these days is not the Fourth Estate that people knew back then either. I did puppets in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area, from about 12 to about 18. And then I stopped because I wanted to be a journalist. I did that mainly because I was shy and that was a good way to express myself. I did that because I made some little bit of money here and there doing shows. But once I realized after high school, I didn't want to puppeteer. No, it was too limiting for me. And so I wanted to be a journalist. And then Jim had seen me perform when I was 17. And when I was 19, when I was in college, he asked me to come out and try working with him for 6 months part-time. And I stayed for about 40 years.
That's a pretty good stint, isn't it?
Yeah.
You could still be a journalist.
I don't think journalism needs
me. Hey, Frank.
Journalism does need a savior, I'll tell you that much.
I'm here.
Thank God.
Frank, you're on Twitter. You are a citizen journalist now, whether you like it or not, because you are on social media. You have a phone in your pocket, I presume, that takes photos and does videos. We're all journalists now. You made it, baby.
Well, unfortunately, we're not trained journalists. I'm not a trained journalist, so it's not the best. But as far as Twitter goes, it's funny, I joined Twitter because I wanted to have an opportunity to tell people about MuppetGuysTalking.com, which is the MuppetGuysTalking.com is where one will find the documentary. And I did that, and it turned out that I'm really enjoying it, and I don't even talk about Muppet Guys Talking anymore.
Yeah, you had one job, Frank, one job.
I know. And our PR person says, Frank, can't you just talk about it? I said, no, it's just me. People have asked me to write books, and I don't want to because that's hard work. But here, I just tell things of my life and what I feel, and it's great. I'm having a great time.
Okay, so I've learned two things about Frank Oz in this interview. At the beginning, I've learned that he's quite stubborn, and now I've learned that he's lazy. You don't want to write a book?
No, of course not. That's hard. That's like doing a book report in school. I am lazy that way. And I also am a private person, and I don't want people to know what toothpaste I use, for God's sake.
This is disappointing, Frank. I thought I was going to like you.
There's no way in hell you're going to like me.
I thought I was going to come away with a friend at last.
No, after this time, I knew how you'd feel about me, so I thought I'd just start to be miserable from the beginning.
Hey, if you'll keep your misery here just for a few more minutes, we'll come back to Muppet Guys Talking, and where people will find it, we'll talk more about your cybernaut behavior. I think that's what they call people like you now, who release online films and are addicted to Twitter. You're a cybernaut. Me again, talking to you now and not Frank Oz. Now, as you may know, when you interview people at Frank's level, you're at the mercy of their schedule, which is often controlled by a publicist breathing down your neck, sucking all life out of the situation. We're talking Harry Potter Dementor type vibes here. NB, there are some nice publicists. Some. Hi, John. John's Frank's publicist. He's cool. But with Frank, I was in the weird and awkward situation of telling he, Frank Oz, that I, Jamie Stangroom, nobody, was out of time with him. Now, don't get me wrong. I would have listened to him till the end of time, but that studio time wasn't mine. So I didn't get a chance to talk about his directing work with The Little Shop of Horrors, The Dark Crystal, and Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, just to name 3. But I did manage to squeeze in and out some chat on Yoda, The Last Jedi, and his thoughts on CGI versus practical effects. That's the end of me talking to you about talking to Frank Oz. Thank you for listening. I'm a big Star Wars fan, and I think it's in your contract wherever you go, you have to be asked about Star Wars. You're not off the hook here. You're no way getting off the hook. I loved The Last Jedi.
Thank you.
I almost felt that I knew Yoda was going to pop up. I feel like it wasn't a very well-kept secret, and I don't know if you contributed to that at all.
No. What happened was I was asked to not tell anyone, which of course I wouldn't. And when I was in Pinewood, I shot it in Pinewood and in London. I was there for 3 or 4 trips rehearsing and such. The producer, Ram, who's brilliant and wonderful, really was concerned that people would see me and connect me. But as I said to Ram, I shot a Little Shop of Horrors in Pinewood in 007. So it would be perfectly fine if I was there visiting on a meeting. So that wasn't the problem. But nevertheless, what I was asked to do is not have my name on the poster. Because then if my name was on the poster, then people would know I was in the film. I said, sure, no problem. And then when we had the royal premiere, I think Prince Harry was there. And I wasn't allowed to meet him because only the people in the movie were allowed to meet him.
Wow.
But that's okay because, with the Muppets, we did a couple of royals for one, the Queen, and also for Prince Philip, and also for Princess Margaret at that time. So
you're doing a lot of very royal name dropping here.
At that time, we were so huge around the world. That's what happened. So therefore, as a result, I could say, that's fine, no problem.
How did the process change from the 1980s?
What was wonderful, it was a puppet. And it was me working him with 3 other people, which is always the case. It hasn't changed at all. What we do is we get the script and then we rehearse. Instead of rehearsing one line for about half an hour, we rehearse one line for 2 days because we all have to be absolutely precisely together on every single word, on every single beat. And with 4 people trying to do the same thing, one needs a lot of time to rehearse.
And were you yourself a bit rusty? Because you mentioned you hadn't performed for 10 years.
I think it's like riding a bike. I was not rusty at all. I was excited about getting back into him. My arm held up pretty damn good. I was okay. Yeah.
And what was it like working with Mark again? Did you enjoy striking him with a cane?
Oh, Mark and I are so close. We had we've known each other since Empire, right? It was just great. Mark is a great part of the reason why Yoda works so well, because Mark actually really works for that character like he would work with any other actor. And so part of the value of Yoda to people is with Mark really talking to him and not just a puppet. My job is not to do a puppet. My job is to create a transcendent character, and Mark helps me with that.
And of course, George Lucas, I think it's pretty well known, he did hire you initially as a puppeteer. He didn't want your Yoda voice, did he, to begin with?
No, he didn't. George is, amazing. And that's funny, I miss him because I've done all the Star Wars now, and without him, I kind of miss him. But he's been such an amazing supporter. But George wanted, I don't know what other voice. And so I said, fine, no problem. And then after, I think, auditioning for many people, he finally asked me, after months and months and months, maybe we could try your voice. So I came back and did the voice. I'm not quite sure why, but it's good because I always do my own voices, except with the exception of Dark Crystal with Augur and Chamberlain. Otherwise, I've done all my voices.
And was it you who brought in the weird kind of language with Yoda?
No, that was Larry and George who wrote The Empire Strikes Back. They started that, but it was only half in. Sometimes he talked that way, sometimes he was more colloquial. So I asked George, could I make him talk all the time like that? And George said, sure.
Right, and the rest, as they say, was history. And what about the switch to CGI with Yoda for the prequels? I mean, he's gone from puppet to CGI and back to puppet again. Do you think the need for puppetry in films and telly will ever go away?
I don't know if it will go away. I think, as usual, most things in Hollywood are economic. I think if CGI continues to make money, it'll do CGI. If people get tired of it and they see another opportunity to see something living and breathing and physical, and that makes money, then that will happen more.
But when you learned that Yoda was off down the CGI path, did that worry you at all, or for your colleagues, for your craft maybe?
I don't think that way. I always think for the story. What's the best thing for the story? And George felt for this particular story, he needed Yoda to jump around and fight. And a puppet can't do that. He couldn't do his story if he kept it that way. So he had to do CGI. Obviously, what had happened was in London, where so much of the work is done, the craftsmen are brilliant. And so they didn't get as much work because of CGI, which is glorious now because Ryan wanted everything real and as little CGI as possible. And now they got a chance again.
So when would you say that CGI should never be used then?
In my opinion, there could be brilliant CGI. And I've seen it when it's just part of the story and you don't even know it's there. It's the CGI that's obvious. That's when it shouldn't be used.
Does it offend you when someone uses the word Muppet as an insult?
Wait. People use the word Muppet as an insult?
Yes, I think it's a British thing, And I think you've confirmed this for me now, Frank.
No, tell me. Listen, I lived in London for 9 years, and that's like my second home, but I've never heard that.
Well, people are just too polite here to call you, of all people, a Muppet, I guess.
So when they call someone a Muppet, what do they mean?
I do something stupid, which, if you hang out with me for all of 30 seconds, it will happen.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of saying you idiot or you fool or something a bit ruder, you can say, oh, you Muppet. And I'm like, cool, which one? Honestly, it's used as an insult in the UK.
I wonder what it is in the person who's saying you're a Muppet. What is it that connects you're a Muppet to something negative or stupid? Stupid I understand because we love being stupid, but that's news to me, Jamie. I'll tell you.
Well, there you go. So now you've learned something from me. That's incredible. And I want to ask you then, with Muppet Guys Talking, what did you learn from the experience? What's the one thing that you'll take away from that experience that almost never happened?
What a good question. That's never been asked of me. I have to think about that.
Frank, I'm a little bit pushed for time. Just so
okay, then I'll think about. I'll just take about 3-4 minutes to think about it. Then, I think the real thing is that we've all gotten together, and we confirmed the fact that the most important thing is not the Muppets but us. That we loved us together, and it's out of us that Muppets grew.
And I've got one last word to say about it.
Mm-hmm.
Camel. I waited for that darn camel. I even watched the credits. I waited for a post-credits camel.
People don't know what you're talking about.
They have no idea, and they should wait, right?
And they will never know.
Well, they'll know my anger when they watch it and feel the same level of disappointment that I felt when the camel did not reveal himself.
Well, they'll have to see what it means. If they go to MuppetGuysTalking.com and then they will get the film, they will see what you mean. Thanks for this opportunity of letting people know, because it's not just for the Muppets. It's about people collaborating with each other and working with each other in a way that Jim taught us that most people in this world don't do. And so a great part of the reason came from Victoria, that she wanted to bring that to people around the world, that there is a different way to work than political or in fear or in ego. There's a different way to work. And that's the reason she wanted to do it. And I concur.
Well, I'm glad it happened. I'm glad Victoria pushed you into giving in to your stubborn nature, Frank Oz, although she needs to work a little bit harder to get the camel on camera for next time.
Hey, thank you, Jamie, so much. I really appreciate this. Not everyone wants to talk about something that's new like the documentary, and we believe in it so much. So it's such a great opportunity to talk about it. So thanks so much.
No, thank you. Thank you for talking to me. Not many would. Go to MuppetGuysTalking.com for more on Muppet Guys Talking, and please rate, spread the word on this podcast, tell everybody you know about it, and even some that you don't know. Make a friend on me. And if you've been listening or staring at the same image for 40 minutes on YouTube, please get yourself over to iTunes and the other platforms listed in the description. It would be great if you could help me build this thing. That's it for episode 1. I'm Jamie Stangroom, and I have hair for radio. Until next time, go away.